Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to do a metagame breakdown for the Alchemy format. We're going to take a look at Alchemy Best of 1. Next week we'll probably take a look at Alchemy Best 3. There's been a number of folks in the comments who've asked for this. We don't normally cover Alchemy, but the play rates are seemingly reasonable given the amount of folks playing the format. There's a new set that came out. I actually played some Alchemy this month just to kind of get a feel. So I can report in on this video. Had a ton of fun. The format is pretty wide open. Seemed to have more diversity than standard, given some of the kind of injection of new sets, just the rotation being a 2-year schedule. But like I say, Magic's a game. If you're having fun, play whatever you're having fun with. So this one is for the Alchemy enjoyers in the crowd. So we're going to look at untapped data. There was a new set, the Aether Drift Alchemy set came out last week. We are going to look Diamond to Mythic in terms of the actual win rates, but in terms of metagame distribution, we have about 25,000 games played from Platinum to Mythic. Popularity today, Grixis Heist at about 22%. There's a couple different variants of it. Selesnya Rabbits at 12, Boros Birds at 8. Dropping it down to say gold, you get Boros Mice in there, Orzhov Bats, Race Pass style decks. But I would almost say, like, from playing the format, I got to Mythic in a day from Platinum with Izzet Otters. The deck's really fun. I'll show you that one as well. But all things considered, it was pretty diverse. There was like Simic decks looking to do big ramp things. There was the Birds decks. I think people are just having fun in brewing, which is cool to see in a format. So looking, like I said, there's 7,200 matches in the last week or so. We'll kind of revisit best of 3 next week when we get about a week and a half, 2 weeks worth of data. So the highest win rate deck is Boros Birds, Boros Mice, if you would. So similar to standard, you do have the mouse package, Manifold Mouse, Emberheart Challenger. There's nerfed Heartfire Hero. So this one is 0-1, not a 1-1 to start. You have your Flowerfoot Swordmasters, Might of the Meeks in here, Shard Mage, you're Sheltered by Ghosts. This one's also playing Boros Charm, another way to give double strike, indestructible, or 4 damage. Then we have Recruit Instructor. Whenever one or more mice you control attack, you draft a card from its spellbook, and then its Valiant ability becomes target a spell or ability first time, you create a mouse. It's spellbooks like Ember Cleave, a whole bunch of things to kind of target with Valiant, bunch of pump spells, Might of the Meek, stuff like that in there. Couple Screaming Nemesis, and then we have Valiant Emberkin, 3 mana, 1/1 haste. Whenever it enters or attacks, target creature you control perpetually gets a bonus in power. This targets, so it triggers Valiant as well. And then if a creature you control becomes target a spell or ability, that triggers an additional time. So you can have it basically trigger multiple kind of pump effects, that type thing. Cavern for mouse, and then you also have the Sunbillow Verge to improve the mana base. We then go to Azorius Artifacts, Azorius Synth, 73%. So this deck here, obviously you are playing with Simulacrum Synthesizer, which cares about bigger artifacts, 3 CMC or more, makes you a bunch of constructs, artifacts at scale. You have Pearlious Snare that's serving as removal. You have Turbocharged Escape, 5 mana sweeper for all non-vehicles, and then you get to permanently or perpetually have one of your vehicles become an artifact creature. Sport Skyforge, Flying Vigilance. It enters, you create 4 1/1 servos, then it attacks, you draft basically from the spellbook. That card perpetually becomes a artifact creature. So another way to kind of get some vehicles into play, you have the Memory Guardian is basically a 1 mana 3/4 ideally in the deck. The card that kind of goes hard in this deck is Hangerback Assembler. So 2 mana starts your engines. You get the Hangerback Walker into play, and then once you have max speed at the beginning of your end step, you put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature or vehicle you control. So this is kind of a white Virtue of Courage in a way, where you get a 2, you get a creature, and then later in the game you get to put counters on everything. Gingerbread is a cheap creature, Nesting Pot, and then into the Flood Mods removal. There's a lot of ways with these artifact decks to assemble. You could do Enigma Jewel, you can play full synth package. So the way you kind of configure it could vary, but a lot of the lists I was seeing were like on the Hangerback Walker plan, just getting that going. We have Orzhov Raise Past at 72%. So similar to standard, we see some of the elements with Raise Past. You have in this version the Chittering Skull Speaker. It has starting intensity of 0, so it enters. It increases its intensity by 1 for your subsequent copies, and then you draw a card and lose X life. So they just keep kind of filling your hand. A lot of ways to gain life: Sanctifier, Feast. You have Life Creed Duo, Star Escape Cleric as a way to kind of go from there, and then you drain it out. I might have 2 versions here, so yeah, ended up pulling out 2. This one's more of a Bats version, so we could kind of compare both of them, but this one here is more kind of the combo route with Dewdrop Cure, Raise the Past, and then you have all your sack outlets. Bartholomew is a way to sack your things to get them into the graveyard to get that value to like bring them back. But for the most part, have creatures go into your graveyard, bring them back, drain your opponent out with like Star Stake Cleric. Amalia can also be like an Edict effect. Comparing it to this version here, this card's very strong. So Naktumen Shines Again. Saga. Funny because this would be like the perfect card for a Lurrus deck that you can't play in a Lurrus deck. But 3 mana here. All creatures you own with mana 2 or less get perpetually 1/1. That means in your hand, graveyard, library, in your trade binder, they all get plus. And then you get to seek a creature into the battlefield. So it just kind of pulls a creature into play. And then all your creatures with mana 2 or less get flying till end of turn. So strong card there. You have your Raise the Past line. Your kind of 1-drop dorks, a little bit more removal in this one. Golden Sidekick got nerfed. It's less powerful. I think it was a 2/3 before. But another strong creature. You have your Bat package to kind of interact with your opponent. Soothsayer can search up Sanguine Bond. You have Starstake Cleric again, and then Terrors of the Track is another strong one. So 2 mana, double team flying. It's basically like a Blood Artist that only triggers once per turn, but you can get multiple copies of it. So with these decks here, there's a lot of ways you could kind of configure them that we see. But this is kind of the core of like, you can improve the mana base a little, stuff like that. But core of the decks, get creatures into your graveyard, bring them back. Like the Nantuko, you can just have it as like a tutor effect. There's a lot of ways to kind of configure. So with Grixis Heist, there's a couple versions like I was mentioning. So this one's at 71%. This version here, we have the Storm Chaser's talent, This Town. This Town also plays nicely with Triumphant Getaway, where you can just bounce it back to hand and then recast it over and over again. Very strong kind of revised card set that got originally printed. Like this was 5 mana, I think, originally, the Hymn to Ages, but got reworked to be 2 mana. They're very strong now. So you have Ribald Shanty, Hymnochorus, and Miselic Ballad all kind of work together with starting intensities. In the Otter deck, I play this, and times I draw like 5-6 cards for 2 mana at instant speed, which is crazy. But you kind of use that package. The way you win this is either just Otter beats, or with Triumphant Getaway, you just heist their cards, steal them, and then drain them out that way there. The ballot could force Sacrifice and gain you life. Then you have Candy Trail to set up your draws, Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate, 3 steps as counters, then some removal options. Mystical Teachings can help tutor up stuff, and Deadly Cover Up as a sweeper. So you have something like that. Then you have a version here that is built with Monument of Endurance in mind. So this one here is a draw discard kind of focus. So with Artist Talent in play, basically any non-creature spell you play, which in this version, every card in your deck is non-creature. You draw discard, so you get to trigger Monument. So you can drain them with Monument in terms of making them lose life, as well as, well, this one's not even playing the big guy. So this one's just more of a Monument version of the deck. But you do have kind of your Chorus package, which is fairly common in this format. Love playing these cards. Into the Flood Maw, 3 steps ahead. The draw discard also works. You have Ill-Time Explosion as a sweeper that also draws discards for your Monument. Archival Whorl, which is a cool one. So you can gift them a Mystic Study, and then basically you shuffle your hand. It's Time Twister. So you shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 cards. If the gift wasn't promised, each other player also does the same. So you could gift them a Mystic Study, and then you draw 7 cards, which is interesting kind of build. And then Perforator Croc is just kind of a top end. The cycling works with that, and then it could just be a sweeper in the late game as well. We then go to Azorius Flyers, 65%. So this deck can have very, very strong opening hands. The Awestruck Signet, 1 mana, 2/1 starting intensity. Whenever a creature you control flying enters, if its name is Awestruck, cards you own with Awestruck have increased their intensity. As long as intensity is 3 or more, it becomes a 5/4 with Vigilance. So I've had multiple opponents, turn 1 this, Mockingbird. So you basically have like 8 copies of this effect. You can bounce it back to hand, get some value. Very strong in that effect, just to make really big creatures with flying and Vigilance to close the clock. Into the Flood Maw, unsummon as kind of tempo elements. The Valley Quest Crawler works with birds, so it's an anthem for it. Also helps you set up your scry. The Prairie Survivalist is a way to kind of add some power, both to creatures in your hand, creatures in the battlefield. You have Protection and Plumcree Escort, not on my watch. Cottontail Caretaker can create, basically add the text, this creature has offspring. So if you have these in hand, you can offspring them. Azur's Beastfinder can kind of control things on the board, tap, just nullify their abilities, which is fairly strong. And then Ace Flockbringer, 3 mana, 3/3. Whenever you cast a spell without flying, conjure a duplicate to your hand. And then Aven Interrupter as kind of a counter spell-esque effect. There's also a buffed version. It's now 2 mana. It's a bird element, a bird enchantment. Look at your opponent's hand, pick a card. When they cast that card, you gain 3 life and draw a card. That was another one that was played against me that was fairly strong. So something to consider there. Again, it's still fairly early. This format's not like well flushed out, I would say, but giving you some ideas of what you can play. We have Selesnya Rabbits, 64%, 65%. So unlike Standard, we have some powerful kind of top-end cards, most notably Buxton Decorated Host. So 5 mana, 4/4, but it has Convoke. So this allows you to basically cast it as little as 0 mana by having the requisite colors of creatures in play. Beginning of your end step, if you control a tap creature, you seek a non-land permanent with mana value X or less, where X is the number of tap creatures put onto the battlefield. So it just kind of pulls creatures or permanents from your library, including Sheltered by Ghosts, based on the number of tap creatures. Very strong in that regard. This did get nerfed. I think it's 6 mana now, if I'm not mistaken. But it's still a powerful kind of effect. Amara is another strong one. Comes down fairly early and then lets you draft. Within its draft book, you have Knight Errant of Eos that can kind of chain. You have the one that makes a bunch of tokens from Ravnica, some strong effects there. You have the big dinosaur that also plays into effect. So card advantage engines that you don't normally see in this deck. 3-Tree Battalion is kind of a collected company-esque card that creates duplicate or offspring effects. Conjure duplicate. What's the conjure duplicate? Phrasing. Hop to it is kind of the way to go wide. You have your mentors. The Paw Patch is really good against the heist decks, just kind of putting counters around. But your rabbit kind of standard deck just buffed up in this format. We then have Mono White Cats at 67%. Honestly, this deck, like I ran into maybe once or twice. It can do some pretty strong things. It's just not the most resilient. You have a Rabo that's an anthem, kind of goes wide. Enduring Innocence is a way to draw some cards. Your life gain package with the Johnny's Pride Mate, Sky Knight Squire can kind of scale. It's also a cat. Authority, life gain ways, just kind of reasonable 1-drops. Okay, like the Vanguard's not the best. 2/1 is okay, but really you just want to kind of curve out, throw out some threats and just hope that isn't enough, kind of get your things growing. You have a Johnny Collar Pride. You probably want to kind of curve out, like get rid of Felidar Retreat, play more 3-Tree Battalion. I would probably play the full set of Enduring Curiosity as an example. Probably just trim the 1 Authority. Regal Caracal is okay on the top end. This Clazo can be a fairly large bonus. Like it's 2 mana in this deck a lot of times since it gets a cost reduction for your cats. There's also the 1-drop human that if you exhaust from Aether Drift is cat focused, so that's another card you could maybe consider there. Then we have Gruul midrange. So this deck here is kind of your big mana deck. We have Fuel Tanker Feaster, which is a strong card from the set. 2 mana, 1/3. At the beginning of your first main phase, a random creature card with the greatest mana value in your hand perpetually gets 1 less. So you have that, and then Fountain Port Charmer, which can reduce the cost. So it allows you to hard cast these bigger creatures for much fewer mana. Your Outcaster Trailblazer can draw you some cards. You have Smuggler's Surprise to cheat into stuff. Your Overlords on top end. Calamity could make copies of things. Twin Flame Tyrant would deal double damage. So kind of a ramp deck into big chunky creatures on the top end. I've seen some of these cards just be played in a mono green shell with like the 5 mana 8/8 and playing Galta and stuff like that. But this is kind of a powerful engine to cheat out bigger things on the top end. And then, so the deck I got Mythic with, came in at 511, but I did most of my run in about a day or so. I was playing on mobile for the most part. In Diamond, I lost 3 games of best of 1 the entire time. It was very, very quick, but this is the deck itself. So I took an existing Otters list that was in best of 3 and kind of tailored it for best of 1. Originally, the list had Ral in it. I found Ral too slow for the best of 1 meta. Instead, I went in on this town package with Storm Chaser's talent. The big card here that we don't have in standard is Enduring Friendship. So think of it as all your Otters like super prowess, and they have their normal prowess effects, but then this adds extra power. It has double team, so when you attack with it, you get another copy of it. When it dies, it's got the Glimmer effect, so it comes back as an enchantment. So it's just like a permanent prowess emblem. The card's very strong. So basically with it, you have your Ribble Chanty, Hymn to Ages package. Pearl of Wisdom also can be as little as 1 mana with like Stormcatch Mentor. So I've had turns, you cast this, draw 2 cards, cast this, draw like X amount of cards. You could get to the point where this town's just like a lock. This also reduces it, so it's just 1 mana to target your stuff, which is very strong. Bounce Off, then you have Burst Lightning, Ribble Chanty, so 10 1-drop interaction spells. One thing to note, this only cares about instants and sorceries, not non-creature, so the Storm Chasers doesn't trigger this here. The other kind of cool thing here, so you'll notice green mana. So I have this for Elusive Otter. I wanted another 1-drop in this, just to have more aggressive turns. Sometimes just going 1-drop here into Pearl of Wisdom is a reasonable play, just to kind of curve out. In a pinch, this is also something you can play early, and then later just bounce it back to your hand to cast the Grove's Bounty. So it's a permanent that works with this town that can later be a spell as well. Grove's Bounty plays really cool, especially with multiple Stormcatch Mentors, because the X gets reduced. So there's times where I've cast this with just a green mana for like 1 or 2 mana with Stormcatch Mentors out, because it reduces the X cost. And then this puts counters on things. It lets you kind of play around. This deck can output huge amounts of damage in a very quick manner. I had a ton of fun. This plays kind of like a more tempo-oriented version of like Historic Wizards, but really enjoyed this deck. So let me know what you've been playing. There's like black-white decks, like the kind of bounce decks that I've seen. Didn't really show up in the stats right now, but as we kind of go, I'll see how this format's doing. I'll see the reception of this video, and we'll maybe put this as part of the regular installments on the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.